Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and welcome to This Week in Black and White. I'm here with Susan Patton, aka the Princeton Mom. How you doing today, Susan?
Excellent. And yourself?
I'm doing really well, really well. I am just sitting here. I was eating some pizza for breakfast, and I'm sure you're gonna make
So I
fun of me for that, but it's good pizza, so that's what makes up for it. So okay,
and
so
and
so
the
so so
it's like the weekend are like sex. Even if it's bad, it's good. Whatever. Go
there
ahead.
you go, there you go. See, there you go. Okay, so I want to ask you this. You were talking to me about first. You were talking about a comment that someone made, where you said that when you have hired people in the past and didn't know they were black, you would walk in the office and say, "Oh my God, you're black," and but you'd be delighted about it. And some people were offended
Absolutely.
by the fact that you would so blatantly address the race of the person you hired. Can you explain that?
Well, I can't explain why anybody would be offended by that. All I'm doing is making mention of something I simply didn't know until now because the interview process was entirely on phone. It wasn't even Skype, it was just phone. And because I work primarily in industries, consumer marketing and magazine and publishing, that don't hire a lot of black people, that when I come to the office, put in that FaceTime, which I work from home, so I don't spend a lot of time in anybody's office and my clients' offices. When I get there and I see that the person I hired was black, oh my goodness, you're black. I am absolutely delighted because, especially in a publicly held company, there are diversity initiatives that hiring managers are entrusted with and are expected to fulfill. But as I've said to you before, I don't like to outreach specifically to any community. I don't like when a hiring manager says to me, "I only want a woman," or "I only want pick a color," or "I only want pick a sexual preference." No, I want to get you the best people for the job. That's it. So don't be offended that I'm saying when I meet a candidate that I hired for the first time and say, "Oh my gosh, you're black." I think that's wonderful. I'm just surprised. I'm delighted because the industry doesn't attract a lot of black people. Delighted you're here. And it's not as though I've ever offended any of these people by saying that. And partly because, it's the nature of how I work. I get very schmoozy, very, personal with my candidates. I get to know them very well over the phone. So that, when I finally do meet them, the first thing I do is I hug them, I kiss them, they hug and kiss me back, and I'm looking, oh my gosh, you're black. I had no idea. Because it couldn't matter less. It couldn't matter less. This is not a question of discrimination. Making mention of the fact that somebody is black is no insult. It's no insult to make mention that somebody is, a man, or somebody is blue-eyed, or somebody is, I didn't say you're short and ugly. So, spare me your outrage. Save your outrage for something that matters.
Well,
Um,
I can say when I saw you in New York a week ago, I guess. It,
and how much was that? Tell our viewers, how much fun was that to actually be
oh,
together?
we had an absolute blast, and when I
Good.
saw you, you hugged and kissed me, and
Of course.
you sat with us. There was a table full of black people, and then there was you, and you were
Right.
incredibly comfortable.
Each like the other. Right.
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 Even though I think the restaurant had a lot of white people in it. I can't remember exactly.
Yep.
It was a nice restaurant, and you were very comfortable in that space. And it comes from it partly comes from I think your roots. You said that you were the only white kid in your class, and so
Yeah.
do you think that sometimes having this excessive comfort around black people can increase or decrease your likelihood of offending black people because you're not as self conscious about what you say as someone who doesn't understand black people who's afraid of them? What would you say about that?
Well, that's an interesting idea. Well, I'm not too self-conscious about many things, and I don't really worry too much about offending people because I know in my heart I look to treat everybody with courtesy, with dignity, with respect. I try to comport myself as a person of integrity. Will I occasionally aggravate people or annoy? Yeah, well, yeah, everybody does, but it's never with that intent. So I never really worry about that. If I've offended anybody, I'm quick to apologize because I certainly never intend to offend anybody. But that's an interesting question you're asking. Is there such a thing as too comfortable? Do I get too? Is there a thing about being too comfortable? Well,
I wouldn't say too comfortable. I'm not going to say because I don't want to criticize your level of comfort. What I want to say is that do you think that there's sometimes a perception that because you're comfortable, because you say what's on your mind and you don't filter, you don't feed into a lie. Do you think that there's a likelihood that maybe you're going to end up offending people more because you're saying what's on your mind, as opposed to someone who maybe has a racial bias and has a fear of black people, who says absolutely nothing because they're afraid of saying something politically incorrect? So I'm not criticizing the level of comfort. I'm just
Yeah,
asking,
yeah,
do you
that's my
think that
question.
being so comfortable makes it more likely that you're going to be criticized or called racist? For example, you ever see, for example, a rapper or something who is so comfortable around black people that they use the N word the way rappers
Yeah.
do, and then someone calls them racist. They say, "What are you talking about? I'm not racist. My girlfriend's black. All my friends are black. My family's black." Right. So do you think that there's something? Do you think that effect kind of comes into your life sometimes?
Well, somebody sent me a very funny postcard via email a couple of weeks ago, and it said, "If you're offended by what I say, you could just imagine what I hold back." And I think that's that's very true. I mean, even I mean, we're saying I have no filter. I don't have much of a filter. I think that if we treat each other honestly and respectfully, I could say anything I want to you. I honestly can. You may not like it, but I hope that you're not offended by it. If I share an honest opinion with you, we could agree to disagree. We could talk about what we're disagreeing about, but I can't imagine that you're going to be offended by my sharing my honest opinion with you. I simply can't believe that. Well, maybe I should believe it, because it seems like offense is like, the new entitlement. It should become, the next amendment to the Constitution. We are entitled to be offended because everybody seems to be offended by everything. No matter what you say, somebody is offended. And that's a shame. And I think that because people are so quick to be offended, there is a sense of pulling back, of let me not share, let me not be so forthcoming, because it's not even so much that I don't want to offend you, it's that I don't want to be screamed at for having offended you, which is, that's a substantive difference. There's the question of I don't want to offend you, but it seems that the bigger question is I don't want to be held accountable for having offended you.
Mm.
What do you think of that?
Well, what I will say is that there is kind of a perception I have that sometimes the truth coming from a good person is less palatable than a lie coming from a bad person, right? Because, and what I mean by that is that, if you consider, let's imagine you have two people. You have, that you have the Susan Patton, and then let's say you have someone who's blatantly racist, right? Well, the blatant racist knows that there's a bias. They know that that they have an issue with black people. So that person probably isn't going to say very much to black people, at least when it comes to how they truly feel about race, right? So instead, they're going to replace their internal biases with the most pleasant lie that you can ever
Right,
imagine, right? Like, right, because if I'm going to lie, I might as well give you exactly what you want to hear.
right.
Whereas if you take, say, a Susan Patton who says, "Hey, I don't have an issue with black people. Black people are fine. I could date a black guy. but whatever." And you take a Susan Patton who just says what's on her mind. You can imagine how the words of the racist might actually sound more pleasant to hear than the words of the honest person who's just trying to be good and decent and all these other things, right? And I think that's what we live with in our society. A lot of people have huge racial
Right.
biases, and because they know these biases are there, because they're so blatant, they say, "You know what? I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to hide from the issue. I'm just going to feed you the most pleasant and beautiful lie imaginable." And then it makes racism more confusing because racists
Right.
don't tell you who they are anymore. This isn't 1945 in Alabama, where people would say, "Hey, I think you're a nigger, but I can still be your friend, but I think niggers are less human than the rest of us. But I can still be
Right.
your friend. I still love the black people who work in my kitchen or whatever, right?" It's just sort of this very complex relationship that racist whites had with blacks, where they loved us and hated us at the same time, almost like dogs. We love our dogs, but we know our dogs are not quite human, right? But you fast forward that to today, where you have so many people that that are well trained on political correctness. They know what language is going to be offensive, and they just have a complete fear of being called racist or whatever, so they don't say anything. And if they say anything, it's going to be just the most wonderful, most pleasant words you've ever heard. And one of
Right.
the areas that I've that I've seen this actually is in your space, in the corporate space. I think in corporations, in institutions, universities, etc., there is a consistent claim that they value and appreciate diversity. When I believe that many of these institutions do not. I believe that they're taught to say it, but I don't think they actually follow through on what they say. What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. And I find that it's the most liberal people, the people on the far, far left who are all about diversity. They're the poster children for diversity, except if you feel differently than they do. And then they have no tolerance for your opinion. They're completely intolerant of an opinion that's different than their own. And it drives me crazy. And we're living in times that are so politically correct, that are so driven by political correctness, that anything you say seems to pose a mortal threat to the emotional well-being of everybody on the other side of that argument. You can't say anything without people feeling like, oh my God, oh my, we have been mortally offended. My emotional sensibilities are mortally offended by the expression of your opinion. And this is always the people on the left. These are always the extreme liberals who are all about diversity, who simply cannot tolerate an opinion different than their own.
Well, let me ask you this: Do you believe that do liberals truly value free speech?
I don't think so. Oh my God, I've been dealing over the past couple of months with an extreme issue personally with members of my class and members of the Princeton University community, because I've expressed my opinion about the importance of women taking responsibility for their own safety. Well, this has created such an uproar on my college campus and among alumni groups. They're claiming that I am blaming victims. Well, of course I'm not blaming victims. I'm saying don't be a victim. Well, then they're saying, well, you shouldn't, it's irresponsible to even say such a thing because it puts the burden of safety on women instead of on the rapist. No, it's not a rapist's job to not rape you. It's your job as a woman to keep you're laughing.
I'm only laughing because by definition, you're right? I mean, a rapist, if they have a job, their job would be to rape people. Because by definition, I've never heard it said that way. So sorry, please continue.
But that's what it is, and it's like saying burglars should be taught not to steal. That's what they do. It's your job to lock your door. So the liberals, the extreme left, they're so angry with me for suggesting personal responsibility. Yeah, I think that they don't want me to express an opinion because they don't like the opinion that I'm expressing. My feeling is, well, that's sort of too bad. You're going to have to learn to live with your disappointment because I certainly am not going to be silenced. I'm completely confident in the truthfulness and in the value of reminding young women that they are responsible for their own safety. They're responsible for their own happiness. They're responsible for their own success. And what I think is dangerous is when women start believing that their safety is somebody else's responsibility. That's dangerous. I don't have a daughter, but that's dangerous to tell women it's the rapist's job to not rape you.
Well, that's funny you say that because when I've heard the rhetoric, that comes from the left on the issue, what I've heard is not so much people say directly that it's the rapist's job not to rape. I've heard them say instead of teaching women to protect themselves from rapists, teach men not to rape. Right, but what's interesting to me is that, most men don't rape. All right, most of us don't, try to have sex thinking, oh, I'm going to take this. Right. So if you're talking to a group of men like say me and other normal guys, we're going to sit here and we're going to say this is kind of strange. You're telling us not to rape. Okay, we won't rape, and we'll tell other men don't rape. But there are going to be rapists in the room who aren't going to listen to you. So. It is kind of an awkward sort of argument, and I think sometimes telling men not to rape or teaching men not to rape, it's almost like it's almost as offensive as telling women not to falsely accuse men of raping them. And you've heard, and women's groups will get
Like,
offended by this. They'll get offended
of
by merely
course,
saying to a group of women, "Hey, look, if you're raped, make sure you're not lying about it." They'll say, "Why? Well, you're assuming all women lie." Well, I mean, if you're saying to a group of men,
don't
don't
rape.
rape women, then you're. I mean, I can become equally offended, right? I
Absolutely.
think that you're absolutely correct. I mean, if you assume that the world consists of two types of men, the ones who might rape you and the ones who might not, you have to ask yourself, okay, these men are the good guys, these
Yeah,
men are the bad guys. How do you best deal with the bad guys? Are the bad guys going to be swayed by you telling them, please don't rape me? Maybe some of them will, but most of them won't, because that's what they do. They're rapists, right? So
correct,
then at that
correct.
point, it seems that the most logical thing to do is to protect yourself from the bad guys who are going to do
Precisely.
what they do, right?
Precisely. I have been advocating this for to women's groups constantly. You have to take responsibility for your own safety. You are your own first line of defense. And why ever would we tell women anything other than that? Why ever would we infantilize women by suggesting that they're too weak, they're too stupid, they're too feeble to actually take care of themselves? Oh my gosh, I think it's absurd. So yes, to answer your question, yes, I think liberals are looking to shut down the conversation. Liberals want you to only hear what they want you to hear. They're unwilling to recognize a point of view other than their own, and any suggestion that their point of view might be wrong is taken as a mortal threat to their emotional well-being. They can't even listen to an opinion different than their own because it's like a sacred belief that is being violated.
Are you familiar with Trevor Noah, the black man who
Yeah,
was supposed to take
yeah,
over for Jon Stewart? Have you seen the debate over
I
Trevor
have.
Noah and his
I
tweets?
have.
Uh,
I have. I've seen what he's written about women. I've seen what he's written about Jews.
right.
Yeah,
And I find that interesting because I think that now there are people that feel that what I think they said he offended women, Jews. I think
fat
they
people
claim that he offended African Americans
and fat people.
and fat people. That's right, fat shaming, which I think is a
That's it.
stupid term. I hate that term. That's just as
I
dumb.
hate them.
I'm sorry. I simply said, on my Facebook page, I said, look, when I wanted to stop being fat shamed, I stopped being fat. It doesn't mean everyone can just stop, but I'm sorry. Americans are fatter than most of the world, and a lot of it's because we love to eat. But but I thought that was interesting. So, do you consider this criticism of Trevor Noah to kind of fit in with what you're saying in terms of liberals sort of picking anything anyone says and saying, "Oh, you're offending this group, that group, that group, that
That's
group."
exactly what they do. That's exactly what they do. I think that Trevor Noah probably said a couple things he shouldn't have said. He's a comic. He is a comedian. It's okay. He's not a member of the Supreme Court. He doesn't legislate, law. Come on. He's a comic. Let him say what he wants. You either like his humor, he doesn't like you, or you don't like his humor. There are probably a couple things he probably shouldn't have said. What concerns me is that, and I'll be curious to know your opinion on this, Stephen Colbert has been replaced by Larry Wilmore, who I love. Jon Stewart has been replaced by Trevor Noah. So you have two white guys being replaced by two black guys. Are you at all concerned, or do you at all think, concerned is the wrong word, do you think that Comedy Central is going to lose viewership dramatically because the perception might be this has become an Afrocentric channel, and the news that we used to enjoy with Colbert and Jon Stewart is now going to be overtaken by black men?
I think that Comedy Central. I personally, as a black man, I applauded what they did. I applauded their courage, but it's hard not to say that some of the white audience members might be turned off, but at the same time, that does say something. That says more about our country than it does about the men they chose to replace these guys.
That's true.
And I don't know what the selection process was, but if it turned out that that the two guys that they felt were best for the job just both happened to be black, then I mean, what else are you gonna do? But at the same time, here's what's interesting to me. Trevor Noah I think if anybody has an opportunity to really transcend his blackness in a lot of ways, Trevor seems to be the guy who's positioned to do that. Notice he's not African American; he's South African, so he has a global perspective, and he's also, remember, he's also there is a difference between a dark skinned black man and a lighter skinned black man. That's why Barack Obama would not have been elected. A lot of people would argue that Barack Obama wouldn't have been elected
Ah,
if he looked like Wesley Snipes.
right.
And so this sort of biracial,
Somehow more palatable to a white audience, and
right,
somehow
right, and that's been proven, in lots of studies and things like that. And also, not only is well, he has the biracial appearance, but he's also from South Africa, so he's got this sort of global presence that isn't sort of restricted by the limitations that come from having endured
right.
racial oppression in America his entire life, even though he's endured it in South Africa, which is another thing. I wonder if that's what they're aiming for, because here's the other thing too that's interesting. One of their other HBO just picked this guy from was it no, not Canada. I think he's from England or something, and he's doing really, really well. I have to look him up. I can't remember his name, but he does exactly what Jon Stewart does, but he's international. So they're drawing in this huge global audience from this guy, and the Americans love him too. And I wonder if that's sort of the new the trend now, that they want international figures, because they're like, look, if you can relate to an American audience, and you can also draw people from Africa and China and in Europe, then that's more money for us. I'm not sure if that's what they're
Yeah.
thinking here. What do you
I
think?
doubt that that's where it's going to go. My concern is going to be, sort of like what I saw on The View. I used to always watch The View. Used to love The View. Loved Whoopi Goldberg. Loved Rosie O'Donnell. But I think when the program started having 2, 3, and sometimes 4 black hosts, it was like, okay, this is like a show for black girls, not a show for me. And I think that's really what happened for many viewers. I mean, I talk to women all the time, and yeah, I don't really watch The View anymore. I think it became too Afrocentric for some audiences. And my suspicion is that Comedy Central will see their numbers drop dramatically, because there are viewers who are going to think, oh, this has become a show for black people now.
Well,
That's
I would say that their demographic is going to change, absolutely. But I think the ultimate measure in the equation is, does one effect outweigh the other? So, if you're going for this sort of, international, biracial thing, and you're trying to draw this really diverse audience and still keep the majority of your whites,
right.
if you do that well, then it's going to work, right? And here's another thing too. African Americans, unfortunately, this drives me crazy, but they actually watch more TV than white Americans do. A lot of studies show this.
More than me.
So a lot of
More than,
networks, sorry.
not more than me.
Well, not more than you, not more than you, but a lot of networks actually build their entire audience off of the black community. Oprah,
No.
when Oprah started OWN, she was struggling when she tried to do this diverse programming and all this Discovery Channel stuff because Discovery they put up $500 million for this. They gave her a bunch of programming, they gave her access to their channel, and so she was using their programming, which appealed to a diverse audience. The network was doing horribly. Then she reached out to Tyler Perry, made a deal with him, put some soap opera on there. Black people watch it religiously. The network took off. Same thing. ABC. ABC is went leaning heavily toward the black audience with some of the shows they have between Blackish
Yeah.
and Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, all that. Fox with Empire. Now Empire is Fox is the number one network in black homes, which drives me crazy. You know that, but it's because of Empire. And then but then Empire has broken all these ratings records overall, not just among black people, but among all viewers. Another example is ESPN. ESPN. I know a guy that works with ESPN, and he said that we started using more black hosts because we realized that. And this is another interesting thing. He said we realized that African American men are unemployed. Many of them can't find jobs, so they're home during the day. So they're watching ESPN. So we're going to cater more of our programming to those individuals, because half of our audience was black males. And it is crazy given that black males are about 6.5% of the population. So sometimes I think maybe that's the thinking. But with Comedy Central, it's hard to see that argument actually applying, because Comedy Central isn't ESPN, it isn't ABC, it isn't
No,
Empire
it doesn't.
slash Fox. So
It isn't. I wonder whether all of these black programs, and I watch most of them, by the way, that you mentioned. I watch most of them. I wonder whether this is sort of an overcorrection that is sort of sort of bubbling. Black stuff is bubbling on the TV airways now, and it will subside. The way 2 years ago the movie industry was dominated, or the movies, it was 12 Years a Slave, it was The Butler, it was, don't make a face, don't make a face. But there were many, many black movies, Afrocentric movies. The winners of the Academy Awards were black people. And last year there was none. I wonder whether there was sort of an overcorrection, a bubbling that, was going to subside. And I hope these shows do well. Scandal, my gosh, love Scandal to pieces. Absolutely love Scandal. Everyone I know who watches it loves it. And the other programs that you mentioned as well. I have to go back to something you said about fat shaming. Not about fat shaming, but I want to talk about slut shaming for a moment. It makes me crazy that the far left, the feminists, the liberals, they're all upset about slut shaming. Makes no sense to me. If you comport yourself in a promiscuous manner, if you comport yourself in a slutty fashion, it's shameful. And the idea that anybody's going to, wag a finger at you for calling slutty, disgusting behavior shameful makes me think we're one step away from being criticized for thief shaming. You do bad stuff, you should be ashamed. So I'm just saying, fat shaming, slut shaming, fact, some people really, they can't do anything about it, and I understand that. I've struggled with weight my whole life. I get that. But slut shaming, yeah, you act like a slut, it's shameful, and don't think it's anything other than that. And the feminists, the liberals, they're not going to save you from that, honey. You comport yourself like a slut, it's shameful, and that's that.
Well, I will say that, it's interesting because some people will say, well, slut shaming is wrong because if a man does certain things, it's okay, but if a woman does the same thing, she's considered a slut. But one thing I think about is, if gunfire goes off outside the house and the woman hides under the bed and the man hides under the bed too, or uses the woman as a body shield, then he's going to be called a wimp, right? Why? Well, he's doing the same thing the woman might do, but you're a man. You're not a woman. You're expected to defend your family. You're expected to go out and protect against whatever might be coming, to hurt the people you love. So it would be kind of strange for me to come back and say, well, no, you shouldn't criticize me for being a coward because you're wimp shaming. You're right. That's exactly the way I see the term slut shaming. Slut shaming. And look, I think that we can criticize the term slut shaming while at the same time, in my opinion, I do applaud sexual liberation for women in the sense that I'm not really going to necessarily judge anything you do or how you do it. At the end of the day, though, this is what I tell my daughters: make sure you're getting what you want. And so that means that, look, if you decide you want to be promiscuous, and look, I'm your dad. It's not my job really to monitor what you're doing in the bedroom. I mean, if I see too much, I might say something. But at the end of the day, don't carry yourself in a certain way and then get upset because men are responding to you in a certain way. Right? Oh, well, I sleep with these guys on the first date and none of them want to marry you. Well, you know what? That's kind of what's going to happen, right? So it doesn't mean that you can't do what you want to do. And it's funny. I think I get that from my mom. My mom used to always tell me, she said, you can do whatever you want to do. Just understand there will always be consequences. And don't make a certain choice and then get mad because the consequences are going to follow, because that's just stupid and illogical.
Right. Absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. And, you have to be discreet no matter what you do, and especially what you do in the bedroom. This requires discretion. It's nobody's business. Do what you want, get what you want, but you have to be discreet about it.
All right. Well, that is a great way to end the conversation. You're such a lady, Susan. I have so much respect for you.
I have so much respect for you, Dr. Boyd. I always love talking to you.
Yes.
I always love talking to you.
Yes, this is awesome. Same here. Well, everybody, this is Susan Patton, aka the Princeton Mom. I hope you will go and buy her book. Her book is called Marry Smart, and it's a good book. I mean, good information. It's the kind of advice I would give my girls. And I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World. And in case you're wondering, we do have a new film out called Resurrecting Black Wall Street. You can go check out the trailer of the film at resurrectingblackwallstreet.com. So I hope you will go check that out because we're talking a lot about black economic empowerment and all those other good things. So until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.